so people can see it. Terrific. So I'd like to welcome everyone to this week's webinar from the Mussar Institute with Marilyn Paul on work and order. And Marilyn, for some reason I lost your video.
Can you see me?
Yeah, when you talk, yes. I see Irv on there. Irv, if you can turn off your camera. And Muriel, if you can turn off your camera, that would be very helpful. Should be next to your name, next to the microphone icon, should be a camera icon as well. So I'm going to let Marilyn tell you a little bit about her background. She's presented for us before. She has a background in this area. She's been a number of this area and consultant on this area for many years. So I am going to turn it over to Marilyn. Like I said, if you want to ask questions, put them into the chat box, and we will get to those questions as we go, and especially as we go toward the end of the webinar. So as we get in, there'll be an opportunity for those questions. So Marilyn, I'm going to turn it over to you. I see a few people are having still issues with the sound, and I'm going to try to help them out with that. So okay. Marilyn, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes. I can hear you and see you.
Okay, wonderful. So for me, it's good morning. I'm in California, in a cold room, at least for California, it feels cold. So I want to welcome you to this conversation about work and order and moving from chaos to order. I wanted to do this topic because we've just celebrated Purim, which in many ways is a celebration of things shifting, of the high becoming low. The high person goes low, the low become high. Things change. Things are not what they seem at Purim. And we are now moving towards Passover, many of us doing extra cleaning to make sure that our homes are really scrupulously clean for Passover. And we are looking for ways to get rid of our chametz, both inner and outer, and hopefully creating some order. So I am giving this talk because Seder is the midah of my life. If there's a central organizing midah for me, it is Seder. And I have learned, next slide, that Seder, order, is not just order. It's a remarkable gateway to other very important midot. For example, respect, patience, humility, and responsibility. And in that, each of us probably has a few midot that are central to us. And if order is central to you, it may mean that without meaning to, you tend to create disorder, and maybe you have a hard time arriving on time or keeping agreements. Maybe not. But there are many different ways in which order manifests and disorder manifests. For some of us, it's just a lot of piles around the house, creating an unpleasant office space or an unpleasant living space. But today I really want to talk about work and order. And I think I'd like to start with a story. So I am an organizational consultant by training. I work in organizations to help create better work relations among people, help people achieve their goals, help people talk about the difficult issues that they are having with one another, help them with leadership development and strategy. And I've worked for several consulting firms. A while ago, before I really grasped that Seder was my issue, I knew it was my issue. I didn't really understand that it affected other people. I was working with a very dear colleague. I'd gone to graduate school with him, and we were working on a project in Boston for a major philanthropic organization. And it was time to analyze the data. We had done all the interviews, we had a good idea of the themes, and it was time to write them up. So I said, we were in a meeting, and I said, David, I'll do it. I'd love to do it. I love data analysis. I love putting it together, and he knows that, and I know that. I do a great job. He said, yes, I know you'll do a great job, but you won't get it done on time. And I said, well, yes, I will. And he said, I don't think so. You haven't done it on time yet. So, but this time I'll do it, I promise. And he leaned back and very kindly, with as much kindness probably as he could muster, he said, I don't trust you. And in that moment, I felt as if my world fell apart because he was right. I saw it in that moment. He could not trust me to meet a deadline. And I let him do the data analysis. He did a great presentation. And I thought, but I have to change. He's right, and I don't want to be this way. I want to be respectful. I want to be trustworthy. I want to be responsible. That's my idea of who I am as a professional. I soon discovered that this wanting to change is not a path to change. And what I'm going to do is talk about the Mussar path to change. And I've written about this. I wrote a book called It's Hard to Make a Difference When You Can't Find Your Keys. And in that book, I start off by saying the very first thing to do, if you want to move from chaos to order, the very first thing to do is to want to, is to invoke Ratzon, your will, your wish, your want.
No, just my
your want.
Well, we're going to go and get some hay.
I think we have someone on the line here. So I'm not sure who it is, but please mute your
No.
Thank you. And the next step that I really want to talk about is a step that Luzzatto talked about. Everyone could please mute your mic. That would be helpful. Please mute. Thank you very much. So, the very
Oh, I will.
Yes,
We'll do something.
Can you hear me? Next slide, please. Thank you so much. The very first step is what Luzzatto talks about. It's translated often as watchfulness or mindfulness, but let's take that nida and look for our impact on others. You know, I had a colleague who was very courageous. And my colleague David told me he could not work with me. But very often we do not find out what it is like for others to work with us. They often don't tell us. Every once in a while, someone might say, it would be nice if you could arrive on time, or I'm disappointed that you delivered this material late. But we need to look for our impact on others. Why is order so important, and why do we need to understand in a workplace how we can cause others distress? Order is so important because for teams to work well and for organizations to work well, we really do need to trust each other. We need to be able to count on each other to keep our agreements. An organization works well, work goes well, when our word is good, when people can count on us. What happens when people can't count on us is that there becomes a layer of difficulty. There becomes a layer of static. In Hebrew, the word is shibushi. There's static on the line. And when we really don't know if someone's going to deliver, we start hedging. Maybe I'm not going to work as hard to meet that deadline because I know my colleague won't. I later discovered that nobody trusted me to be on time. In fact, finally I learned from some friends and colleagues that when I made an appointment with them at noon, they would show up at 12:30 and they could count on me to arrive a half an hour late. It was very troublesome for my friends and colleagues. I worked for a firm once and we had a meeting and one of my colleagues stood up and railed against the people who got their invoices in late. I looked around. I knew it was me. I wondered if there were others. Nobody told me directly that when I got my invoices in, my travel expense receipts in late, it really affected how others got paid. Finally, somebody told me, you have to get your expense report in on time. And I tried very hard. My disorganization is both stemming from anxiety and creates anxiety. So look around. Look at how other people react to you as a work partner. Now, one of the things that happens when we are late is that it does give other people an excuse to be late. It's hard for all of us to have integrity when one person keeps slipping. It sort of drags the group down. So it affects teams and affects organizations. Some organizations I have worked in actually have it in their culture. It is in their culture to arrive at meetings late. They schedule meetings in such a packed way that no one could be there on time. It's obvious, but you might be surprised how often it happens that people do schedule meetings 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4. Well, it's impossible in that case to be on time. Then we have something where people are sliding in late and leaving early. When I work with organizations, I often recommend to them the 50-minute meeting. That allows 10 minutes to tie up loose ends for yourself, make sure you know what your next step is, and to arrive at the next meeting on time. So in this case, you want to do something that Alan Moranis talks about in his book With Heart in Mind, to love rebuke or love feedback. Be avid for feedback. Look for feedback. In our soul's journey, it is one of the best things that we can get from other people is feedback. In fact, when I think about that very painful and difficult conversation with my colleague David, I am immensely grateful to him. Now, Alan emphasizes in his book that we are talking about loving rebuke. And I think it has two connotations, as he mentioned. One is we love the rebuke, we look for it, we ask for it, and we deliver it with love. And one reason why my colleague David had so much impact on me is he delivered the feedback with such love that there was nowhere to turn. If before I might have come up with enormous defensiveness and said, well, I had this reason and that reason, and you're late too, and I don't like the way you said that. I'm not taking that feedback. You weren't nice. Well, all of that drifted away as he helped me change my life and become more responsible. The next topic that I'd like to, I need the new slide, please. And the next slide. So as part of looking for your impact on others, what you will become aware of, my final comment about this, is become aware of the secret compact at work. If we don't behave well, it really gives others permission not to behave well either. And there's sort of a slippery slope here, where I'm so grateful that you're not holding me accountable for my poor behavior at work, and I won't hold you accountable, that the whole quality of the work experience can slide. Okay, next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you. I need to go back one slide. It should be called Counting Up the Cost. Great, thank you. So now, if we want to change, we actually look for what are the costs. Now we've gotten to know the field. We've looked for our impact on others at work. We've started to get to know, in as neutral a way as possible, what it's like to work for us or with us. And it's true, if you're a disorganized boss, I really encourage you to look for your impact on others, because you are making your work life for your direct reports very difficult. In fact, if you are the boss and you are disorganized, inadvertently, without meaning it, you will spread disorganization throughout your organization. So now, in order to change, it's helpful to know what are the costs. The personal costs to you, I think, are very deep. You might think about, what are the soul costs? Are you able to work this way and stay deeply in touch with your still small voice within? Are you able to work this way and offer the kind of respect, the kavod to others that you want to offer them? The word for responsibility in Hebrew is achrayut. Achrayut. Are you able to be responsible and have integrity the way you would like? Well, you may start to notice that disorder and disorganization cost you an enormous amount. But here's a cautionary note. You may be sitting here saying, well, disorganization is not my issue. But perhaps your issue is too much order, too much detail orientation. One of the beauties of Mussar is that we really think about this as a measure, a midah, a measure of a trait along a range. So while I might be talking about disorganization, there are some people who are overly organized, too much of a stickler, too rough on others when they're not crossing the T's and dotting the I's. So we're looking at a golden mean of order, just enough organization to conduct ourselves well. When you're counting up the cost, look at the cost to others of your disorganization, and you might start becoming aware of those. We deny how important these are because it is painful. It's painful to learn what our impact is on others. And perhaps no one will rebuke us, but we can still make some kind of restitution. We can make a tikkun. We can make things whole. All of us are challenged by the enormous cost of passivity around technology. If we do not really learn how to master our email and master our phones, we will be inundated by information, much of it information that is not relevant to our work life and information that we cannot use. We blame technology, but as we start creating order, we can build better filters. We do not have to respond to every piece of information with equal intensity. What happens then is that we cannot tell the difference between what's important and what's not important. That is a sign of disorganization. So we work on our filters. Either we put in actual filters into our email inbox, or we check every day what is important today. I talk to people about the 3 most important things to get done today. It's a way of defining what's important. Without that, we can be at the mercy of technology. Next slide, please. The final topic I'd like to discuss is what helps create order at work are good agreements. I worked with a client once. It was a high-tech division of a hospital, and they were creating remarkable technology to help deliver health. It was called health informatics, to help deliver patient information to doctors and vice versa. It was a high-tech, highly productive group, but there was one little problem. They were visionary. That's not a problem, but they promised a lot. They promised to deliver fantastic technology at unreasonable deadlines. Well, that's fine if you can pull all of your resources together and actually deliver. But what happened was, in order to meet their deadlines, they would deliver products that had a lot of bugs in them. And clients were not happy. Clients delivered their unhappy message. And the team decided again, we're going to promise more and deliver better. And again, they missed. They didn't deliver the more or the better. Well, you can imagine where that went. They kept making agreements that they could not keep. One of the things I've learned over time, and I've worked with a number of organizations about this issue of good agreements, is that good agreements are not a one-way street. It's not that I say to you, do this, and you say yes, and you deliver. Good agreements are a negotiation. Good agreements are ones that each individual can keep. And why are good agreements so important at workplaces? Because it is through the agreements that we make, not just the policies we set, and not just the goals we set, but good agreements are how we allocate our most precious resources. The minute I say yes to you, that I will promise to do something, I am now allocating my time, my energy, my attention, and money, just by the simple act of saying, yes, I will do this. Now, one reason why it's so good to work on good agreements as people who are learning to grow and learning to develop our traits is that when we are making an agreement, many of our habitual ways of thinking come into play. If someone asks you to do something, or at least if they ask me to do something, my reflex is yes. I want to be a good team member. I want to say yes. And in that moment of saying yes, it might be because I want to look good. Or it may be because I want to be a good team player. It may be because I want to be that person who everyone turns to. We can start looking a little bit at what's motivating us. What's the ego intention? Just to have a look at what is involved with saying yes. The other thing is it's harder to say, maybe. Tell me more about what you want. I'd like to understand. Do I really think I have the resources to do this? Good agreements build trust. Next slide, please. Next slide. So I wanted to bring this in where we talk about Nasata Venatata Ve'emunah. From the Talmud, Rava said, after death, when a person is brought to account for his life, the first thing the heavenly tribunal says to him is, did you conduct your business transactions faithfully? Now, we can think about that in a couple of ways. Why the very first thing? Because perhaps we know that all of our transactions are negotiations, a Mussar umatan, a negotiation that we have to do in good faith, because that is how we become a good citizen at work and a good citizen at home as well. I've been through many conversations that sound like this. Would you call the electrician, please? Sure. A couple days later, no electrician has been called. Because why? Well, was it today you wanted me to call the electrician? Why don't you call the electrician? How come you're delegating it to me? These things need to be talked about, and if we learn to have these conversations, actually trust builds. Next slide, please. So in one organization I was working in, this is what we discussed. This is how we discovered that it was very, very important for this leadership team to work on their agreements. This was typical. The leader said, why don't you go ahead and frame the sponsorship issue? To a colleague who says, sure, of course, I'll do that. 3 weeks later, nothing had happened. Well, that could lead to some irritation, but let's look at this exchange, a common exchange, willing assent, but a very unclear request, what is framing, and saying yes to what? The colleague has no idea, but he's very friendly with this leader and, of course, wanted to say yes. Next slide, please. So this is against the rules of PowerPoint, but I put this here because I want to talk about what a negotiation looks like. Now, in many cases, people feel like, well, I can't negotiate. If I've been given a request, I have to say yes. But I strongly urge you to have the courage to say, let's rethink, at least you and me. How are we going to make agreements so that they actually get kept? Leader says this time, why don't you go ahead and frame the sponsorship issue? I do think it's a priority, but what do you think? So already there's an opening. And many of you might be saying, well, my boss doesn't give me an opening. But you can say, how come this is a priority? Or even, I could do this, I'd like to know more, which is what the colleague said. I'd love to frame the sponsorship issue, but I'd like to think this through with you. As you know, my time is very limited, and I'd like to quickly check how you see the level of priority of this project. What is the scope right now? Are we talking about a paragraph, a short paper, a research project? Do I go outside and make phone calls to other organizations and see how they do sponsorship? My role in this is not clear. Am I the right person? I'm not sure. So the leader gets to think for a minute because he's also overbooked. And he knows that he's in an organization where everyone is scrambling. Okay, why don't we do it this way? Give it an hour, or maybe two. Create an outline of the issues and bring them back to me. Maybe check in with one other person. So the colleague said, more or less, this is a little edited. Essentially, he said, I'll put in an hour. I'm going to put the issues on a one-page sheet. I'll get it back to you by March 30th, and let's put a meeting on the calendar to talk this through. So the leader says, I'll see an outline on the sponsorship issues in my inbox by March 30th. And then he recommends a resource. Well, this is a much better agreement. It has a due date, it has a scope, it has a overall time frame, and the colleague knows that's all he is responsible for now. And why is this so important? It's important because so many agreements are made on the fly, so many projects we don't even get to them, that this little minute in time drastically reduces the chaos in an organization. It does mean that both the leaders, the management team, others in the organization need to open up a pathway that says we are committed to reducing the work overload in our organization, to making better agreements. So as you can see, this whole area is a great area for soul work. We look for places where we're perhaps scared to sit down and negotiate something different, or where we don't want to let others down, but we're surprising ourselves by letting each other down frequently. We want to show respect. And it's very difficult to face how disrespectful we can be with our work habits. So what I'd like to do actually perhaps is draw this to a close here and see if there are any comments or questions. Can I have the next slide, please?
Yeah, Marilyn, there was a question about what is Tochacha rebuke. Maybe you can say a little bit more about that.
Okay. Tochacha is translated as rebuke. And rebuke, we usually think of as feedback. In Tochacha, the meaning of the word rebuke, I think, really comes through as a way to help us be in holy community. Well, we refer to Tochacha in Leviticus chapter 19, the Holiness Code, in a couple of different ways. We are enjoined to rebuke others in such a way that we do not carry a sin to them. If we want to be in holy community, which is what as Jews we are really meant to be, we need each other to give each other loving feedback. We need each other to tell each other how we impact each other. And why? So that we can grow to be the people we are meant to be. And if we really grasp for a minute who we are meant to be, then we are going to ask for feedback. Please tell me how I affect you. And even if the feedback is unpleasant and maybe it's just dead wrong, maybe we can find a little bit of truth in the feedback that helps us grow. Does it take courage? Yes, it does. But if we really remember who we are created in the image of God. And sometimes we get shut down around certain habits. I certainly did in my relationship to order. We need others. I would not be doing what I do today. I coach people around issues of disorganization. And amazingly enough, I am doing this webinar this morning, and then I am packed and ready to fly to Philadelphia. The cab is coming in 20 minutes, and I can do this. I am all packed and ready to go, and I will speak with my husband before we leave because he's overseas. Could I do that if I were on the fly and totally disorganized? Absolutely not, but we're ready to go. Other
okay. So if there are other questions that people have, you can type them in the chat box and send it to me or send it to everyone. The chat.
Okay, well, I'd like to point out two articles. I have two articles on this. One is an article called "Is Moving Too Fast Slowing You Down?" And you can go to my website at bridgewaypartners.com. I wrote another article with my partner, David Stroh, called "Managing Your Time as a Leader." And then last slide, please. And then finally, I wrote a book about my core issue. It's called "It's Hard to Make a Difference When You Can't Find Your Keys." It's the only organizing book I have found that has a chapter on keeping Shabbat, or a part of a chapter on keeping Shabbat as a way to help us keep order. My next book is going to be An Oasis in Time, drawn on Sabbath wisdom to create your weekly rest and renewal. I would really love it if you go to my website, MarilynPaul.com, and sign up for more information. I have a passion for helping others find a derech seder, a path of order through their lives. And why? Because when we have a little bit more order, even just a little bit, we can hear the voice that guides us. And we sorely need that.
So there's another really good question from Heidi. And this is something I was really thinking about too, because it's something that's very prevalent, and many of us have to deal with it either with ourselves or others. That's the role of ADHD or other issues that can get in the way of order.
Yes. Wonderful, wonderful question. Very important. Thank you so much. I have ADD. And I think it's very serious. And taking it seriously means that we, first of all, learn about it. Having ADD is a huge plus and a challenge. The plus of ADD or ADHD is that we can be remarkably creative. We can be remarkable at moving from one thing to the next. We can take on a lot of different items. Often people with ADD are outstanding in an emergency. We don't want to get rid of the ADD. In fact, we cannot. It's part of our makeup. So there are many, many advantages. I think the challenge of ADD is to find a few points of order. Just enough so that we are not driving others crazy. For example, I, to this day, find it hard to remember to put things back when I'm done. I have an urgency to move on to the next thing. But I've built in a habit of transitioning so that I now know from sometimes good experience, mostly bitter experience, that it's really important to look around before I move on. Does that sound like a tiny little habit? It is. But if you look around before you move to the next thing, it helps immensely with reducing the clutter on the fly, losing things, losing track of things, just that little bit. So I talk about ADD in my book. I have ADD, and it's something that we can learn to deal with just enough so that we are easier to work with and easier to be with ourselves. Look, we're never going to be super organized. I married a very organized person, and I learn from him all the time. But it's deep in his nature to create order as he goes. It's deep in my nature to sort of leave a mess, and this is why this is so important to me. So I think I need to draw this to a close. If there's one quick last question, I can take it. Is that it?
There's one or two things. One quick, do you have this book is this book available in audio?
I'm creating an audio right now, and I will be putting up a test audio on my website next week for free. So it will be up for free for about a week. So if you can give me a call, don't give me a call. Go to my website next week and look for that free, it's an MP3 audio that will be available, and it's a workshop. It's not a copy of the book, but it's a workshop based on the book.
And so one final question, thank you for that. One final question. Any specific tips about showing up on time?
Okay. I will give you a very, very quick tip that I use all the time. I use something that's an engineering approach called backcasting. And essentially that means I work backwards. For example, I know my flight is leaving this morning at 1:10. So I want to be at the San Francisco airport at 11:45. So now I'm backcasting. If I want to be there by 11:45, I have to get on BART by 11:45, by 11. And that's why the cab is coming in 15 minutes. But we work backwards. Don't work forward. If you work backwards, you start to see. And so backcasting, I think what I will do is write a blog post about arriving on time. So you can look at my previous blog posts. So look in the coming week for a blog post on arriving on time. And another thing is to make it important. We have some deep beliefs that people who are late are important, and we often all wear busy as a badge of honor. I want to make a clarification because some people will be watching this webinar later than now. So I want to say that there will be a free MP3 audio up from today. No, I think it will go up on March 10th, and it will be up until March 20th. From March 10th to March 20th. And now I'm going to say thank you so much.
Thank you.
Please go to my website. There are a lot of resources on this topic at www.marilynpaul.com and also www.bridgewaypartners.com. So Google me, you will find my website, and I thank everyone so much for coming this morning.
Thank you, everybody, for being on. We look forward to our next webinar, and Marilyn, thank you very much. Look for a link to this recording of this session. Please forward it to friends and others, and let them know about our webinars, and the link will come to you by sometime tomorrow. So thank you very much, Marilyn. Safe travels, and we'll see you soon.
Happy Passover, everyone. Have a good holiday.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.